Hey there, I'm Joe Weems. Before we get into the video, I want to remind you about ng-conf 2023 happening in Salt Lake City, Utah on June 14th and 15th. Head over to ng-conf.org to check out the speakers, check out the talks, and to get your ticket before they all sell out. We'll see you there.
So I am Adrian Iskandar Espinosa Caballero. Because of the long name, you guessed it, I'm Mexican. I'm an Apple senior software engineer. And today I'd like to present to you a new architecture to implement micro frontends. And because this solution will allow you to mix and combine different frameworks, I decided to call it micro frontends and the multiverse of frameworks. Also because I love Marvel and superheroes. So let's take a look at the application development journey. When you start a new project, usually you just start by choosing the framework, right? Like you choose Angular, React, or any other modern framework that you want. You start building features, then the business grows, the team grows, the app keeps growing at a very fast pace, and it keeps going on, right? So this could lead to big monolith applications that are hard to maintain and develop. And when your team grows enough to the point that the framework wars start, so everyone in here is saying, like, nah, we should choose Angular, we should choose React, Svelte, or Stencil, or Vue, or Remix, or Quick, right? So that is a good point where you should start thinking of breaking your application into micro apps, right? And the modern way to do this is via micro frontends. So let's take a look at the advantages of micro frontends. The idea behind micro frontends is to think about your website or your web application as a composition of features, right? That could be owned by one team, or it could be owned by multiple independent teams. So this way, each team owns a distinct area of the business, right? And every team can have like different areas of expertise. For example, one team can be experts in Angular, like the guys present in here, or another team could also be like experts in React or in Vue, right? So micro frontends allows you to divide and conquer. So why micro frontends? First, scalability, right? Like it will give the ability to have the couple independent code base and also independent deployments. Right? It will improve team independence because you divide the work into multiple teams. It will allow you to have like single responsibility teams. For example, think of an e-commerce, right? You could have like the homepage team, the checkout team, the product team, the sign-in team, and so on and so forth. So smaller code bases also represent a smaller learning curve. So it means that you can hire and onboard people quicker. Right? And also, in this example, each micro app could also have like a different tech stack. Reusability. Even if you break apart your application into multiple micro apps, it doesn't mean that you cannot reuse code, right? Like so, in micro frontends, you can create like shared libraries that are for solving common problems across all apps. Like, what are these common problems? Authentication, analytics, internationalization, feature flags, A/B experimentation, styling, components, and I can continue, right? So there are many things that could be common across like many micro apps. Privacy, right? Like this is a big thing at Apple. So micro frontends also allow you to improve privacy because when you break apart your code into different micro apps, you have more granular control to who can access that code. Right? And also like more granular control of who can access the user data. So think about like, for example, like if you are creating like a private or secret feature that you don't want like a lot of people to know until you release it, like you can just assign that to one team, right? Like, and then that feature will only be visible by that team. And the last one, right, like a visual continuity, like I mentioned, like even if you break apart your application into different micro apps, you can have like a common styling. So it will give like the look and feel of having just one single page application, even though like it's a very complex architecture. So now, how do you do this? Like this was a very hard problem for many decades before, but now, there's something called Webpack Module Federation. Before this, like you could just break apart your application by URL, right? Saying like, hey, like /app1 will consume this service with this Docker or this service container or whatever. /app2 will go to this service and stuff like that, right? Or you could use iframes, but then you will have to deal with all the complexity that iframes has, right? Like, for example, like iframes are not very responsive, it doesn't communicate navigation very well, and other things that I will cover, like in this demo. So you will have to create like a lot of custom tooling. But now, like we have Webpack Module Federation. Webpack Module Federation is a JavaScript architecture provided by the Webpack builder that dramatically simplifies the implementation of micro frontends, in my opinion. It was created by Zach Jackson. Let's take a high-level view of what Webpack Module Federation is. So the way it works is that you will have to create a host application, right? How you do this? Like you just tell, like the Webpack plugin for Module Federation, this will be my host application. And then like you install the same plugin, like in the remote modules, and then you say, okay, like this is a remote module. And then the job of the Webpack host application is to load these remote modules independently. It just needs the URL, right? And also, like it will load all of these shared libraries. NX is a monorepo technology that actually facilitates the configuration for this a lot. So I'm using it in today's demo. And the guys from Narwhal are here, right? So if you have questions, like you can just ask. So how does my UI looks, right, when I use Module Federation? Module Federation will help me achieve this, right? Like I will have like my host Module Federation that it can be, like in Angular. And then this host, it will load like independent parts of the UI from different remote modules. It only needs the URL. But if you look into this image, it has one big limitation. And that is that it has to be the same framework, right? Like, so it has to be the same framework, and not even that, the same version. Right? Like, for example, if you use like Angular 1 with modern Angular, it won't work. Right? So what if I don't want to be limited by this, right? Like what if I want to have like all the advantages of Module Federation, but have more freedom of choosing, right? Like what do I want? Well, for this we have like another technology called web components. According to the Mozilla definition, like web components is a suite of technologies allowing you to create reusable custom elements. And these custom elements are encapsulated away from the rest of the application. So please remember this definition, okay? Because when I am talking, or when everybody talks about web components, like what comes to mind of anyone is this, right? So usually when people mention like, oh, web components, yeah, like this is an input, a text area, a label, a checkbox, and this, right? Like so, this is due because of the popularity of libraries like Stencil, right? That leverage web components to provide, like reusable components across frameworks. But remember the definition, right? Like web components' main functionality is to encapsulate code away from the rest of the application. So there's nothing that prevents me to do this. Right? So I am encapsulating like the whole application, the whole Angular application inside a web component. And I can do this with any framework. Right? I can encapsulate Angular, or I can encapsulate React, or any framework. And then you will tell, like, Adrian, but you're crazy. Why do you want to encapsulate the whole application inside a web component, right? I tell you why. Because if I combine Module Federation and web components, right, like this, I will have something like this. Right? Okay, so then I can have like, like a Module Federation host that is in Angular, and then I can load, like a remote application that is also in Angular, but it could be like a different version of Angular, it doesn't matter. Or I can load React, or I can load Vue, or I can load Stencil, or whatever I want. Right? Like so, by encapsulating like the whole application inside a web component and combining that with Module Federation, like it breaks the boundaries of what is possible in the front-end world. Right? Like, so what I'm about to show you today, it was really, really hard to accomplish before, and now it's very easy. So now, ng-conf, I'm asking you, are you ready to see something epic? Do you guys recognize this song? Do you know what song is this? It's the Avengers song, and I will tell you why it's the Avengers song. Because what you're about to see is like that moment when Captain America lifted Thor hammer, right? Like it's that epic. So okay, so let's enter the multiverse of frameworks. Okay. So now let me just pull this right here. And let me start by showing you the demo. Cool. Okay. So in this page, like there's nothing fancy yet, right? Like this is just like the Angular host application loading an Angular component. Same version, same repository, nothing fancy. If I navigate to here, you will see that this is another Angular application that is in another, it could be, in this case, because like I wanted to create like an easy demo, I use NX, right? But this could be like an independent like Git repository being deployed, like in complete different tech stack than the first application. This is just an Angular like application. Next, I have also like a React application. Right? Like this is going to be like a React application also deployed in an independent URL. And also because I want to show you how this works both ways, it doesn't matter the framework, I also have like a React host application. Right? So if I go in here, right, like, oh, I preview like something cool, but yeah. If I go in here, right, it's the same, like a React host application, React component. And now, like, this is, like what I wanted to show you guys, right here, like, is that, okay, what if I want to use, like the most common, like Angular library for components, right? Like the material Angular components, right? Like I'm just going to grab some examples from this library, which is, like I just Google, what is the most popular like components library for Angular? It showed me this. I did the same for React. Right? Like what is the most common like components library, like for React? It showed me this. Like these are the MUI or MUI like material components from React. Okay, so now let's take a look at the cool stuff. Right? So if I go here, right, like the home, and then I hit like the Angular module, this component, this is where it starts getting interesting, right? Because this component is not in this application. This component is actually coming from this other application. Right? And then, like, in here, like, of course, like, this is not maybe that, like, cool, because, yeah, like, it's Angular using the Angular components, right? But did you remember that analogy? Like, hey, what if, like, Captain America lifted, like, Thor's hammer? What if Angular could lift, like, React's hammer? What if I could use any library that I want inside Angular? In this case, like I am using like the most popular React library inside Angular, and there's no problem about it. And this works both ways, right? Like what if, like I am an Angular developer, I want to continue using like the material components, but this other team works with React. Can I use that? Yeah, you can. And now, like, let's continue, with this thing, because things start getting interesting, right? Like, hey, like, this doesn't work just for rendering, right? Like, what if I want to modify the state inside, like, this React application? Can I communicate that back to the shell, like, even if it's in Angular? Well, let's try it. All right, like, what if I, like, this, of course, like, this is just like the component that you guys just saw, like, in there, but yeah, if I hit here, you see, I am modifying the internal state of this React component is re-rendering, and it's also communicating that back to the host. Right? So you can communicate between remote modules that live completely in different tech stack, in different servers, stuff like that, and still looks like a single page application. And this is because like everything is loaded inside like the same window. Okay, so now, like, for example, in here, like, we also have an example of a shared library. Remember, like, this library lives in the host. And this is just like a library to detect like what is the browser and the operating system, like that this user is using to visit my page. Right? Like for example, here you can see that this is Chrome version 104, like it's a Mac OS browser. This library doesn't live in this React application, and it doesn't live in this, even in this application. It lives on the host. Right? But because I am making this library available to these micro apps, like I don't need to do the job twice. Like in this case, like think about like analytics or Datadogs, right? Like what if I want to track all of the URLs on my site, but I don't want to keep doing that in every micro app. So then if you want that, like you just need to add it to the host and it will work. So now, like for example, let's do like a small comparison with iframes. Like remember, like when I use iframe, like this is like the iframe example, right? Like if you see, like even you will have to deal with a lot of complexity if you decide to go with the iframe route. Like for example, here, the first thing you see how like responsiveness doesn't work right away, right? Like it just takes like the whole, like width and height of the iframe, not the width and height of the actual window. So if I go in here, right, like and open this, it works. You see, like you don't have to do extra work to make like responsive design or adaptive design work right away, which is like like another feature. The other one, like you see, like this is a very complex example because I have like Angular in the host, Angular in the remote module, and then I have React. Of course, each one of these has its own routing. What if I want to share like the same, like routing for everything? You see this? Like if I just hit back, it doesn't matter if it's React modifying the routing or Angular, everything works. And that's the difference, right? Like in here, like if I use the iframe, if I change in here, like the URL doesn't change. You have to deal like custom building, like to communicate that. So there are many advantages, like versus iframe. So now let's go to another very cool example. Remember, like this, like a complex example when you have e-commerce, right? What if in this e-commerce, like there is some functionality that other team already built, but it's in React. But I have this other page that is in Angular. Can I combine more than one framework in the same page and everything will work together? Let's see. Yes, you can. So in here, like for example, I have like the material components in an Angular application working next to the React components in a React application working. This application is in a remote URL, remote server. This application is in another remote URL, remote server, and also in here, right, like in the host. And everything keeps working together because it's encapsulated in a web component. So in here, let me just reduce a little the size of this because I want to show you like a quick demo and also cool demo, right? So in here, remember about like communication of state. What if I need to, this will be actually really hard to achieve before, without this. Like, what if I want to modify or do some action into this remote application and communicate that to this other React application and communicate that to the host application, right? So let's do that. Hello, ng-conf. See, like now with this is like so easy to achieve, right? Like so, and what's the trick in here? I'm just using a custom event because everything lives in the same window, right? Like every time that somebody, like change the state in here and say, hey, trigger a custom event that says like, hey, something in here changed. And then all of my other, like remote applications are just listening to that event. So of course, like I know that you already like attended a lot of state management, like tools. Like you can do this with RxJS, with Mobex, with Xstate, like with Redux, like with whatever you want, right? Like, but in this case, like I don't need that complexity for this demo. I just use custom event and an event listener. That's it. Other advantages, like that I can do in here, and I still have a little time. So what if? Remember that I told you like you can also share styling, right? Like okay, like this. Look into this application, right? Most of the styling that I am doing in here so that it keeps the same look and feel, I'm just passing down from the host. right? Like the host is telling like, hey, links should look this way, like the title should look in this way, this will be this font size and everything. But another feature of web components is the shadow DOM. Right? If I can enable the shadow DOM and totally encapsulate the styles in my application. Look at this. This is the same application that I'm going to load, but in this case, I'm enabling the shadow DOM. Okay? Look how this looks. And then in here, you see? Totally different look and feel. Why? Because in here, I am not inheriting any of the styling of the host application. Same module, it looks very different. And this is like, for example, when Teams doesn't communicate very well, or when you have like a junior dev in another like repo, and then he decided to do like, hey, body padding 40 pixels important. Right? And then say like, oh, dude, what did you do? Like, you messed up like my whole app. So in this case, like you can protect your app, like enable the shadow DOM. Right? So I'm almost out of the time, but if you want, I'm the last guy, so if I can have like extra 5 minutes to show you the code, do you guys want to see like the magic behind this? Okay, cool. Let's see. Is that okay for the audience? Cool. Okay, so like that? Okay. So now, this is just, like the demo that I'm running. Like I'm doing the start Angular, which creates, like the host application and also the remote modules for Angular and React. And also I'm starting, like the React host in a different like tab so that it works, right? Like that is just like how I'm starting. What is the configuration in Webpack? Remember that NX makes this so easy. It's this line, right? So I'm saying like, okay, like the host is going to inherit like this configuration that is like from Narwhal Model Federation. And that is pointing to this. Remember, this is the only thing that the host needs to know. Where is this Angular module being loaded? Oh, it's from here. Where is the React module being loaded? Oh, it's from here. And also, like, if you don't know, like where this is exactly going to be, like they say that you have like a very complex architecture, you have 7 environments, like production, staging, development, stuff like that. Let's say that you want to decide that at runtime. You can also do that at runtime. It's just like a different configuration. In here, it's easy example. It's static. So this is the host configuration, right, for Webpack. Then what is the remote module configuration? Let's take a look into that. Like this is like, for example, the Angular remote module configuration. Again, just grabbing like the default from Narwhal. And then I'm here and say, this is going to be the entry point. Okay, whenever like someone asks for Angular module / module, go here. Right? And it's the same for React. Right? Like React is same. Right? Like I'm saying, okay, like my entry point from React is going to be this file. Okay, so now, how does the host do all of this routing? Very easy. Right? It's just like regular, like a module that probably is going to go away after these talks and this thing. Like now we have standalone components, but yeah. So pretty much I do this, right? Like I just create like a matcher that says start with. This is not, I don't think it's worth showing. Like I just did Stack Overflow. How do I match like strings that start with this, right? So like say like everything that starts with Angular module, use my wrapper component and load the Angular module, right? Like, and then create like an element, like inside this page that is going to be called like Angular module root. The same with React, right? Everything that starts with React module, like in the URL, load it from here, right? Like my complex, like example, right? Like it was like this. Okay, like everything that starts with multiple, just load this component. And the same, like with my shadow DOM, right? Like, hey, everything that starts with shadow Angular module, do it like with the shadow DOM. So it's very easy, right? So now, what is this wrapper component? How does this look like, right? This is for the Angular host. Right? I'm just creating like a web component, like I mentioned. Like I am creating like a web component that is going to be called like this. I'm reading like these data inputs, like from the module, the element name and the import name, like in here. And then I am just importing that like from module federation. Remember, like module federation don't take you all the way, right? Like it will just take you, like having like micro frontend, same framework, same version. But if you grab it into a web component, then you can have like cool things like this. Right? Like you see, like it's pretty easy. So the registry, that the part that you're seeing here, is just like that, right? Like telling like like a Webpack where I'm loading this from. Oh, I'm loading this from Angular module slash module. And remember, this is what it was in the Webpack configuration. So now, like, how does the application start? Instead of doing like the same, bootstrap like the application, like remote module, I am just like bootstrapping this like this, right? So this is so that I can have like different versions of Angular. So think about this, right? Like I can have like one page that I am migrating slowly, and some parts are in ng-1, some parts are in the latest Angular, right? So this is how I'm saying, like, hey, depending of what is the ng version, load that. Right? And what is the entry module? Is like this. Right? Like it's just, remember, instead of just starting the application, like a regular Angular application, I'm starting this application as a web component. Like I think it's super easy. So it's going to be the same, like for React, right? Like in React, instead of doing like the DOM, what do you call it? Like create a DOM or DOM ready, like start application. Instead of doing that, just create a custom element called React module root. And then like this element, again, like it's a web component and it's being read by the module. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Like this is like, for example, like the routing inside like React. Right, like the React host, I'm using the same. Like this is like the React host configuration, same as what you guys saw like for the Angular module. Same, right? Like I'm just saying like here, like I'm just creating my own wrapper. And the wrapper from Angular and from React, it looks very similar, right? Like in here, like in React, it's a little easier to implement. I'm just saying, hey, just create like a web component and just render that element inside that web component. And that's it. Like to create like more complex example, like for example, the multiple, what I'm doing, I'm just calling like the wrapper inside in there and say, hey, load in here, like the wrapper for Angular, load in here the wrapper for React. Very easy. And the only difference between the shadow DOM and the not shadow DOM is that I am enabling the shadow DOM encapsulation. Cool, right? And then the last thing to explain, right? Remember when I said how to communicate like this very weird, like or hard to explain, like states? Let's take a look at the dialog from React, right? So, like you said, like every time that somebody selects something, just create a new custom event. The user was selected, and then whenever you want to update that state anywhere else in the application, you listen to that custom event, right? Like, is it in here? Yeah, see? Hey, just listen for when the user was selected. When the user is selected, modify the internal state. That's it. So let me just go very quickly to the demo. So everything that you just saw is in this Git repo. I just call it Model Federation Web Components because I don't think we have like created like a name for this yet. Model Federation WC doesn't sound very good. So if you guys think of good names to think of this, it will be cool. And remember, like no solution is perfect. I want to tell you, like even though like this simplifies a lot of very hard, complex, like architecture, and it's going to be much easier to do than other alternatives, it has disadvantages. Like the main disadvantage that I don't think is going to remain like for a long time is that right now it's only implemented with Webpack. But this week, actually, Zach and Manfred, who also did like a model federation today, like talk, they will be working to enable also model federation in ES-Build. I'm very excited about this concept because I think that it will be something like REST, right? When REST was born, that it was just a way to do things. right? That it started with some technology. In this case, it started with Webpack, but I think that this should expand into any builder, right? Because this works, and I see a lot of potential for this. The other disadvantage, remember, that is the same window. So because that makes a lot of things easier, I also received some feedback that's saying, hey, like what, again, right? Like what if a junior developer, like in this team, or even like someone who just want to mess up with my application, just saves everything into the window object. Or what if two teams that are working independently, like it says like a window my state, and then app 1 and app 2 uses window my state. They will rewrite each other, right? And there is no way to freeze the window object. I already tried, right? Like in the application. So you should be aware of that, right? Like there are things, like it's easy to control. Like you should always do good practices, like namespacing, like everything that you add, like to the window, or you use TypeScript and make sure that, like nobody can modify like the global window interface, but the host, stuff like that. But, like no solution is perfect, right? Like, so you should be aware of what you're doing. And I think that's it. Thank you. So if you guys...
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.